The silent awakening, the galactic void, the hibernation chamber hissed as it cracked open for the first time in 3 millennia. Admiral Zextar Korath's 4 eyes slowly focused, adjusting to the dim blue light of the command vessel Eternal Dominion. His massive form, standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous armor naturally grown from his exoskeleton, emerged from the preservation pod with mechanical precision. Around him, thousands of similar chambers were opening across the vast ship, releasing the sleeping warriors of the Korathian Empire. The galaxy had been quiet for far too long. Zextar moved to the central command platform, his 6-fingered hands dancing across controls that had not been touched for 3,000 years. The ship's systems came online one by one, ancient technology humming to life with the patience of eons. As Supreme Admiral of the 3rd Korathian Expansion Fleet, he had been tasked with one simple mission before the Great Sleep: return when the galaxy was ready for proper rule. The holographic display materialized before him, showing a 3-dimensional map of local space. What he saw made his mandibles click in confusion. Where once hundreds of civilizations had thrived, broadcasting their presence across the void, now there was almost nothing. The great trading routes were dark. The massive communication networks that had once carried messages between star systems had gone silent. Status report, Zextar commanded in the deep, resonant voice that had once made enemy fleets surrender without firing a shot. Elder Vashti, the expedition's chief historian and one of the few Korathians old enough to remember the galaxy before the Great Sleep, approached the command platform. Her ancient form moved slowly, but her mind remained as sharp as the ceremonial blade she carried. My Lord Admiral, our sensors detect less than 12% of the civilizations that existed when we entered hibernation. The Great Solani Republic has collapsed. The merchant guilds of Proxima have vanished entirely. Even the warrior clans of Rigel have gone dark. Zextar's primary eyes narrowed while his secondary eyes continued scanning the data. What of the monitoring stations? The automated beacons we left to watch the primitive worlds? Most have failed or been destroyed by natural phenomena. However, Vashti paused, her voice taking on an uncertain tone that was unusual for the usually confident elder. There is one anomaly, my lord. A world we catalogued as having barely discovered fire when we entered the Great Sleep now shows significant energy signatures. The hologram shifted, focusing on a small yellow star in what the Korathians had always considered the backwater regions of the galaxy. Zextar studied the readings with growing interest. Solthry, I remember this system. The inhabitants were called humans, were they not? Barely intelligent creatures who had just learned to shape crude metals. The same, my lord, our records show them as having no space travel, no advanced energy sources, no weapons beyond simple projectiles. They were marked as potential subjects for future integration, but given the lowest priority rating. Elder Vasht's secondary arms gestured to bring up historical data. Images of primitive human settlements flickered in the air, showing beings who looked remarkably fragile compared to the mighty Korathians. And now, Zextar asked, though he could already see the energy readings that defied explanation. Now, my lord, their world burns brighter than most core worlds ever did. The Forgotten World, the decision was made swiftly, as all Korathian decisions were. A reconnaissance force of 12 vessels would investigate the Sol system while the main fleet completed its awakening procedures. Zextar himself would lead this expedition, curious about how such a primitive species could have possibly advanced so far in a mere 3,000 years. The journey took 18 standard cycles. During which time the Corinthian computers worked tirelessly to compile everything known about humanity. The data was sparse and ancient, mostly consisting of long-range observations and a few covert landing missions that had been conducted millennia ago. The picture that emerged was of a species that was remarkable only in their unremarkableness. Humans were described as having average intelligence, limited physical capabilities, and a concerning tendency toward internal conflict. They were noted as being curious but not particularly innovative, social but not particularly organized, and ambitious but not particularly effective. The final assessment in their file read simply, suitable for manual labor and basic resource. Extraction, integration timeline, 200 to 300 cycles. Captain Murdoch, Zextar's second-in-command, reviewed these files with visible amusement. "My lord, perhaps our sensors are malfunctioning. How could such creatures advance beyond stone tools, much less achieve the energy outputs we're detecting?" Considered this as he watched the Sol system grow larger on the main display. Perhaps they have been conquered by another species. The readings could indicate colonization by survivors from one of the lost empires. But as they approached the outer planets of the Sol system, this theory began to crumble. The modifications they observed were clearly consistent with human design philosophy, as primitive as it had been. The geometric patterns, the materials usage, the structural approaches all matched the basic architectural principles the ancient surveys had noted about human settlements. More disturbing was the sheer scale of what they found. Jupiter's moons had been transformed into massive industrial complexes. Saturn's rings had been partially mined and restructured into orbital shipyards that stretched across millions of cubic kilometers. Mars showed signs of complete terraforming, with weather patterns and atmospheric composition that indicated a thriving ecosystem. "My lord," whispered the ship's sensor officer, "the readings from the third planet are ... unprecedented." Earth hung before them like a jewel of impossible beauty. The ancient surveys had described it as a world of simple blues and greens, with primitive cities scattered across its surface like small scars. What they saw now defied comprehension. Massive orbital structures surrounded the planet in perfect, geometric harmony, each one larger than most Corinthian space stations. The planet's surface glowed with the soft light of billions of population centers, connected by what appeared to be energy transportation networks that spanned continents. Most shocking of all were the ships. Thousands of vessels moved in perfect coordination around Earth and throughout the Sol system, their designs sleek and purposeful in ways that suggested technologies the Carathians had never seen before. "Run full spectrum analysis," Zextar commanded, his voice tight with disbelief. "I want to know everything about those vessels." The results came back within minutes, and they made no sense. The human ships used propulsion methods that the Corinthian computers could not identify. Their hulls were composed of materials that appeared to be synthetic but stronger than anything in the Corinthian databases. Most disturbing of all, several of the larger vessels appeared to be using power sources that generated more energy than should have been theoretically possible. "My lord," Elder Vashti said quietly, "perhaps we should return to the fleet before making contact." But Zextar's pride would not allow such caution. He was a Corinthian admiral, descendant of the species that had once ruled a quarter of the galaxy. These humans, regardless of their apparent advancement, were still the primitive creatures described in the ancient files. "No, we proceed as planned. Open communication channels." The impossible reality, the response came faster than any Corinthian communication system could have managed. Before Zextar had even finished composing his opening statement, human voices. We're already speaking to them in perfect Korathion, complete with proper grammatical structures and appropriate honorifics. Greetings, Admiral Zextar Korath of the 3rd Korathian Expansion Fleet, came a warm, pleasant voice that seemed to carry an undertone of genuine happiness. We are Dr. Sarah Chan Martinez of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. We've been expecting you. The silence on the Korathian bridge was absolute. They had been expecting them. How was that possible? The humans had no way of knowing about the hibernation fleet, no way of predicting their return, no way of even knowing they existed. Zextar recovered his composure quickly, drawing upon 3 centuries of military training. Human representative. I am Admiral Zextar Korath, representing the lawful authority of the Korathian Empire. This system falls within our territorial claims established 3 millennia ago. You will prepare for immediate integration into the Empire. What came back was not the fearful submission he expected. Instead, it was laughter. Pure, genuine, delighted laughter that seemed to bubble up from some deep wellspring of joy. The sound filled the Korathian bridge, and several of the crew members actually took a step back from their stations, as if the laughter itself was some kind of weapon. Oh my, Dr. Chen Martinez's voice came through clearly between the sounds of mirth. I'm sorry, Admiral. We don't mean to be rude. It's just that, ... Well, territorial claims from 3,000 years ago. That's rather like someone showing up at your house with a deed signed by your great ... Well, you get the idea. The laughter continued, and now it was being joined by other voices. Hundreds, then thousands of humans across their communication networks were sharing in the apparent joke. The sound built into a wave of mirth that seemed to wash over the Korathian fleet like a tide of incomprehensible joy. Captain Mordok's mandibles were clicking rapidly in agitation. My lord, they mock us. This is intolerable. But Zextar was studying his tactical displays with growing unease. The human laughter was not just random noise. It was being broadcast on frequencies that his ships used for internal communication. Somehow, the humans had not only intercepted their secured channels, they had done so without any of the Korathian detection systems noticing. Dr. Chun Martinez, Zextar said, his voice taking on the cold tone that had once frozen enemy negotiators. You seem to misunderstand your situation. The Korathian Empire has returned to reclaim what is rightfully ours. Your species will submit to proper authority or face the consequences. The laughter faded, but what replaced it was somehow even more unsettling. The human voice that responded carried the same warmth as before, but now there was something else underneath it. Something that reminded Zextar of the sound a hunter makes when it has found particularly interesting prey. Oh, Admiral, Dr. Chen Martinez said, and now the amusement in her voice was matched by what sounded like genuine fondness. You really don't understand, do you? We're not laughing at you. We're laughing because we're happy. Do you know how long it's been since we had visitors? How long since we had someone to show all the wonderful things we've built? Zextar felt a chill run down his exoskeleton. Show us? Well, of course. You've come all this way, taken the trouble to wake up from your long sleep, traveled here to see us. The least we can do is give you a proper welcome. Please, come closer. We have so much to share. First contact disaster, the invitation was delivered with such genuine warmth that for a moment, Zextar almost found himself responding positively. There was something infectious about the human enthusiasm, something that spoke to emotions he had not felt since he was a young warrior, eager for his first campaign. But then his training reasserted itself. This was not how first contact was supposed to proceed. Primitive species were supposed to react with fear, or at least recognition of their obvious inferiority. They were not supposed to invite their conquerors to come closer with the enthusiasm of hosts greeting long-awaited friends. Maintain position, he ordered his fleet. To the humans, he transmitted back, you will surrender your vessels and prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in the destruction of your cities and the enslavement of your population. What came back was not the terrified compliance he expected. Instead, it was more laughter, but this time it carried a different quality. It was the laughter of someone who had just heard an unexpectedly clever joke, the kind of mirth that spoke of genuine appreciation for absurdity. Admiral Dr. Chun Martinez's voice carried clear affection. You really are delightful. Enslavement, destruction of cities. Oh, my dear friend, you're thinking so very small. The human communication cut out for a moment, and when it resumed, there were more voices, dozens of them, all speaking at once in perfect harmony, creating a chorus that somehow managed to be both hauntingly beautiful and utterly alien to Corinthian experience. We have been alone for so very long, the voices sang together, waiting, building, growing, preparing. And now you're here, with your ancient pride and your old ways, and you want to enslave us. The laughter that followed was not cruel or mocking. It was the sound of pure joy, the kind of happiness that comes from experiencing something unexpectedly wonderful. It was the laughter of beings who had just discovered that their greatest hopes had been exceeded. Oh, Admiral Zextar Korath, the chorus continued, you beautiful, magnificent relic. You want to conquer us. You want to make us kneel. You want to chain the children of earth. The laughter grew louder, fuller, richer. It was being broadcast not just from Earth, but from every human settlement in the Sol system. From the mining platforms around Mercury, from the floating cities of Venus, from the industrial complexes of the outer planets. Millions of voices joined in the vast symphony of mirth, and then, cutting through the laughter like a blade of pure authority, came a single voice, male, calm, carrying the kind of quiet confidence that spoke of absolute certainty. Admiral, said Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet, we appreciate the offer, but we're going to have to decline. You see, we stopped kneeling about 3,000 years ago, right around the time you went to sleep, actually. Funny how that worked out. The laughter continued, but now it was accompanied by something that made Zextar's combat instincts scream. Warnings. His tactical displays were lighting up with contacts. Hundreds of them, thousands. Human vessels were appearing throughout the Sol system, emerging from what appeared to be empty space, as if they had been hiding in the shadows between atoms. My lord, whispered his sensor officer, where did they all come from? Before Zextar could respond, Dr. Chun Martinez's voice returned, still warm and cheerful despite the obvious threat display. We really are happy to see you, Admiral. It's been so very quiet out here. But if you're going to insist on this whole conquest thing, well, we should probably mention that we've had 3,000 years to think about what we'd do if someone ever tried to conquer us again. The laughter that followed was not mocking or cruel. It was the laughter of beings who had found something they'd been looking for their entire lives. It was the sound of joy in its purest form. And for the first time in his long military career, Admiral Zextar Korath began to understand that he might have made a terrible mistake. The laughter echo, the human laughter, was not confined to the Sol system. Within hours, it was spreading across the galaxy on quantum communication channels that the Korathians had not known existed. Ancient monitoring stations that had been dark, 4 millennia suddenly came to life, repeating the sound of human mirth and adding their own variations to it. Elder Vashti worked frantically at her console, trying to track the source of these transmissions. What she found defied everything she thought she knew about the galaxy. "My lord, the humans have established communication networks with civilizations we thought were extinct." The tactical display shifted to show the broader galaxy, and Zexstar watched in growing horror as dormant systems, across hundreds of light years, began responding to Earth's signal. The Zilani Republic had not collapsed. They had gone into hiding. The merchant guilds had not vanished. They had simply stopped advertising their presence. Even the warrior clans of Rigel were still there, their worlds cloaked but very much alive. "How is this possible?" Zexstar demanded. "Vashti est." The voice was barely a whisper. "My lord, I believe they have all been waiting for someone to wake up first, waiting for someone to test the waters." The laughter continued to spread, and with it came responses. Not words, not formal communications, but sounds of joy that transcended species barriers. The Zilani added their crystalline chimes to the chorus. The merchant guilds contributed their harmonic vibrations. Even the savage warrior clans sent their battle songs of celebration. On Earth, Dr. Chun Martinez was coordinating a response that spanned the galaxy. Her voice carried clearly over the growing symphony of interspecies communication. "You see, Admiral, when you went to sleep 3,000 years ago, you left behind a galaxy full of scared, scattered peoples. Pirates, raiders, slavers, and conquerors had turned the stars into a place of fear. So we all learned to hide." Captain Morrison's voice joined in, carrying the weight of hard-won experience. "But we never stopped watching, never stopped building, never stopped preparing for the day when the old powers would return and try to pick up where they left off." The laughter grew louder, and now it was being joined by sounds that no Korathian had heard in 3 millennia. The galaxy was singing, celebrating, welcoming back not just the Korathians, but the possibility of open communication between worlds. "We've been good neighbors to each other during the long silence," Dr. Chun Martinez continued, "sharing knowledge, trading resources, building friendships across the void. And all of us, every single civilization you thought was gone, we all agreed on one thing." "What?" Zexstar asked, though he was not sure he wanted to hear the answer. The laughter faded to a gentle background hum, and when the human woman spoke again, her voice carried the same warmth it had from the beginning, but now it was backed by the obvious presence of an entire galaxy full of allies. "We agreed that the next time someone showed up with an empire and told us to kneel, we would laugh." Zexstar looked around his bridge at his crew, all of whom were staring at the tactical displays in shock. Every system within 1,000 light-years was now showing active civilizations. The galaxy was not empty, it was full of beings who had spent 3,000 years learning to work together, and they were all laughing. "So," Captain Morrison's voice cut through the cosmic chorus with amused authority, "Admiral Zexstar, Korath of the 3rd Korathian Expansion Fleet, what's it going to be? Are you going to keep trying to conquer us, or would you like to join the conversation?" The laughter continued, patient and welcoming and utterly without malice. It was an invitation wrapped in joy, a challenge delivered with love, and a warning disguised as celebration. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zexstar Korath had no idea what to do next. The War of Ekastar. Korathian Armored Admiral Zexstar Korath stood in the war room of the Eternal Dominion, surrounded by holographic displays showing the full might of the awakening Korathian Empire. 3,000 ships emerged from hibernation across dozens of systems, their ancient hulls gleaming with weapons that had once brought entire civilizations to their knees. The sight should have filled him with confidence, but the echoes of human laughter still rang in his audio processors. Fleet Commander Kexabel, a massive Corinthian whose battle scars told stories of 100 conquered worlds, gestured at the tactical display with evident satisfaction. "My lord, the 3rd, 7th, and 12th fleets have completed their awakening protocols. Our force now numbers over 3,000 vessels, including 47 planet killers and 200 system crackers." The assembled Corinthian commanders clicked their mandibles in approval. These were weapons from the height of their empire. Technologies so devastating that entire star systems had surrendered rather than face them. The planet killers could crack worlds like eggs, while the system crackers could destabilize stars themselves. "The humans may have advanced," growled Commander Vexera, her forearms gesturing dismissively, "but they are still bound by the laws of physics. Our quantum torpedoes can destroy matter at the molecular level. Our gravity hammers can crush their cities into singularities. What can laughter do against the force that once ruled half the galaxy?" Elder Vashti, however, remained troubled as she studied the intelligence reports from their reconnaissance. "My lords, I urge caution. The energy readings from the Sol system continue to exceed our theoretical maximums. Their ships appear to use propulsion methods we cannot identify. Perhaps we should attempt diplomatic contact before asterisk enough." Zextar's voice cut through the discussion like a blade. "I have endured their mockery long enough. They laugh at the Corinthian Empire. They find our rightful claims amusing. Then let them laugh as their world burns." The decision was made with the cold efficiency that had once made the Carathians the most feared force in the galaxy. The entire armada would advance on Earth in a show of overwhelming power. No warnings, no negotiations, no mercy. The humans would learn that some things were not laughing matters as the massive fleet began its journey toward Sol. Zextar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. 3,000 years had passed, but Corinthian military doctrine remained sound. Superior firepower applied with ruthless efficiency had never failed them before. The humans had grown strong during the long silence, but they were still just one world facing an empire. The journey would take 12 standard cycles, during which time the fleet's weapons would be charged to full power and their troops prepared for planetary assault. By the time they reached Earth, they would be ready to demonstrate why the Corinthian Empire had once been feared across 1,000 worlds. What none of them knew was that every moment of their advance was being watched, analyzed, and quietly celebrated by beings who had spent 3 millennia preparing for exactly this scenario. The human, welcome Captain Jake Morrison stood on the command deck of the Earth defense platform Harmony's Edge, watching the approaching Corytheon armada through sensors that could track individual insects on planets light years away. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency of people who had trained their entire lives for this moment. ETA on the Corinthian fleet. He asked his tactical officer. 16 hours, sir. They're maintaining formation and charging weapons. As they approach, no attempt at stealth or deception. Morrison nodded, unsurprised. The Carathians were following classic imperial doctrine. Overwhelming force applied directly to the target. It had worked for them for centuries, so naturally, they saw no reason to change tactics now. Signal from Dr. Chun Martinez, his communications officer reported. She's asking if you want her to try one more diplomatic approach. Tell her she can try, but I don't think they're in a listening mood. Morrison turned to address his bridge. Crew all stations, prepare for Operation Joyful Noise. And remember, people, we're not just fighting for Earth today. We're fighting to prove that laughter really is the best medicine. The crew chuckled at the old joke, but their hands never stopped moving over their controls. Around Earth, defense platforms that had been hidden in plain sight for centuries began to power up. Asteroid bases that looked like natural space debris opened to reveal weapons that existed nowhere in Corytheon databases. Ships that had been masquerading as civilian transports dropped their disguises to show hulls bristling with technology 3,000 years more advanced than anything the Corythians had ever seen. Asterisk, Dr. Chen Martinez's voice came through the fleet-wide communication system, still carrying that warm, cheerful tone that had so confused the Corythians during first contact. Admiral Korath, this is your final opportunity to reconsider your approach. We really would prefer to welcome you as friends rather than defend ourselves against you as enemies. The response came back in Zextar's coldest command voice. Surrender your vessels and prepare for occupation. This is your final warning. What followed was not the terrified compliance the Corythians expected. Instead, it was laughter. Not just from Dr. Chun Martinez, but from every human ship, station, and settlement in the Sol system. Millions of voices joined in a chorus of mirth that seemed to fill space itself with joy. "Oh, Admiral," Dr. Chun Martinez said through her laughter, "you really are committed to doing this the hard way, aren't you?" "Very well, Jake, they're all yours." Captain Morrison's grin was audible in his voice as he responded. "Thank you, Doctor. All units. This is Harmony's Edge. The Admiral wants to play. Let's show him what we've learned to do with 3,000 years of practice." The impossible battle, the Corythian fleet opened fire at maximum range with weapons designed to crack planets. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space, carrying enough destructive force to vaporize mountain ranges. Gravity hammers launched projectiles that could crush entire cities. Energy beams capable of melting continents lanced out toward Earth's defenses, and every single shot missed. Not missed in the sense of poor targeting, but missed in a way that violated everything the Corythians understood about physics. Their quantum torpedoes simply vanished mid-flight. Their gravity hammers curved around their targets as if space itself was bending to protect the humans. Their energy beams hit what appeared to be empty space and dispersed harmlessly. Status report. Zextar roared as his tactical displays filled with error messages. "My lord, our weapons are firing correctly, but the humans appear to have the form of defensive technology that the explanation was cut short as something impossible happened. One of the Corythian battleships, the Iron Vengeance, simply stopped, not destroyed, not damaged, just frozen in space as if time itself had paused around it. Then came the human response. It began as a single ship emerging from behind Earth's moon. Nothing impressive by Corythian standards, roughly the size of a heavy cruiser. But as it moved toward the Corythian fleet, it began to change. Its hull shifted and flowed like liquid metal, growing larger and more complex with each passing moment. Weapons that had no names in any Corythian database emerged from its surface. "What is that thing?" whispered Commander Vexera. Before anyone could answer, the human ship fired. But it didn't fire energy beams or projectiles. It fired laughter. Actual sound waves that somehow propagated through space, carrying with them a joy so pure and infectious that several Corythian crew members found themselves fighting the urge to laugh along. Asterisk.